This talk is going to be some reading from this particular book, The Model for Ideal Family and World Peace. Does anybody have this book?
Yes.
Or read it? So, I'm going to read actually from it, which I frequently do. We do. And then maybe some comments in between. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No?
Yeah, now we can hold it like this.
All right. So I'm going to talk about something that true Father Moon talked about quite a lot in the last maybe 10 years. But maybe 15 years ago, 20 even, I heard him say, I was at some large auditorium where I was sitting way far away, and he was on a big stage, and he said something that he asked us a question, which we all answered wrong, and it was, and I never forgot it. And then later he started to talk about this subject matter, and then Mother Moon picked up on that theme a great deal, and even more recent speeches she's using this. And he asked a question first. He said, "Who knows you best, God or yourself? Who knows you best, God or your conscience?" And we all were sure that we knew the answer, and we all went, "God!" And he said, "No." He said, "No." And I've been intrigued by that for a long time, and I've wondered, because he said, "Who knows you best yourself?" I've been intrigued by that, and sometimes I thought that I understood it, and sometimes I didn't. I wasn't sure. This speech, Father Moon gave quite a few times around the world, and then later Mother Moon gave it, and then later had some even illustrations, illustrating it more and fleshing it out. So I'm going to start with this. She says, "If you study yourself, you will notice that your conscience knows everything about you. The conscience is closer to you than your own parents are. Some of us may think we're not that close, or our parents are not that close to us, but of course that's ridiculous, because our parents are very close. We're very close. We're flesh and blood, and we're raised hopefully by our parents or our grandparents. But she says the conscience is closer to you than your own parents are. And it desires, the conscience desires to possess true love, to be embraced eternally in God's bosom. When we marry, we separate from our earthly parents, but not from our conscience, with which we are born. We are born with our conscience. The conscience we have, we are born with it. The conscience loves us. God loves us. I love you. But Father, Mother is saying the conscience loves us. Have you ever heard that like that? It's not a common kind of idea. The conscience loves us. And its mission is to transform us, to develop us into eternal sons and daughters of God. I'm a little bit intrigued with the use of the word conscience in Asian philosophy, maybe Buddhism. There's an emphasis, and today among many people, there's an emphasis now, it's a whole department of thought of the development and the recognition of consciousness, right? Awareness, right? You heard that. And then, and in some religions, like Buddhism, kind of emphasis, and not just them, but an emphasis on kind of washing away or liberating many, many thoughts in our minds and our desires, eliminating our desires, even, to just make unity, oneness with pure consciousness. Consciousness, not conscience. Conscience is something, is Judeo-Christian in a certain way. I mean, people talk about it and make everybody feel guilty. You're not living like your conscience. The conscience, now I might be wrong about this, but conscience is something that's emphasized. Part of the reason is to present the idea that human beings are born, or to emphasize very clearly that human beings are born for purpose and direction, that we have a destiny to accomplish, and that destiny is, one with God. But this idea of consciousness sometimes is a little bit confusing. In Buddhism, there's a joke. I saw this Buddhist humor. You ever seen Buddhist humor? It's a cartoon, and one Buddhist monk said to another Buddhist monk walking in, "Hey, how's nothing?" How's nothing? Nothing is kind of the purpose, to accomplish nothing. But it's a very mysterious concept in a certain way, and it can be incorporated into the idea, or understood, the idea of conscience and pureness of heart and mind. So that the goal of nothing is to wipe away false thoughts, false desires, and encounter pure goodness. Sometimes it's even defined as pure consciousness. Sometimes it's even defined as pure nothingness. And it's interesting. But I've seen that Father Moon, Mother Moon are emphasizing conscience. Conscience. So they said the conscience doesn't need a teacher. Have you ever heard of a minister of education in some country announcing a plan to educate the conscience? Many of us might say it's a good idea, but she's asking that question. If we had gone the original way of the conscience, we would have known clearly the course to follow in life. It would have taught us and guided us to go to God's bosom. Because your conscience knows everything about your life, when you go to the spirit world, you will discover that there is a complete record there in the spirit world of everything you did on earth. This is to fulfill the mission of the conscience, to convert us into unblemished, true sons and daughters of God. Is there anyone here who is convinced that he or she will not die? Honestly speaking, that's another thing. Young people never think they're going to die. I mean, some young people. But, even now, even myself, I just don't really, I live as if there is no death. And of course there isn't, there's eternal life. But the physical body absolutely dies. And you may think, of course, but young people, especially like my son, he drives like there is no tomorrow. He drives really fast. He's a very skilled driver, but he really drives fast. Jacob, slow down. I don't want to die too young. And I don't want you to die too young. But doesn't, you know what I'm trying to say? Young people don't believe in that they're going to ever die. It's inside. You know, it's inside. It's not intellectual. It's inside. And we all kind of think that way to some extent. I'm talking about it now for the first time because of the last time when I went to the hospital, I was there. And for now lately, I've been thinking about, oh, I am vulnerable. My body is vulnerable. So, but still I find there's something inside of me that doesn't believe it. Of course, it's because it's my spirit who knows I'm eternal. But anyway, she asked that question because is anyone convinced that they'll never die? When you enter the spirit world, you will immediately be known, she says, you will immediately be known by your name. Your entire life will be known, as well as that of your ancestors. Because the spirit world transcends time and space. We must not bring anything to that world that stains our conscience. For that reason, you need to understand that the conscience is above all other teachers. Today, we have gathered distinguished personalities here in this room. Among them are some professors. Honestly, there has never been a professor who possesses a teaching ability superior to that of your conscience. It fulfills the same role that a compass fulfills for a ship's captain. Then she asks another question. Father has asked this question. To the many distinguished people gathered here this evening, I would like to ask, when you're thinking about getting married, do you want to have a spouse inferior to yourself? The answer is no. And if I asked you whether you wanted a spouse 10 times better than yourself, no doubt you would reply, yes, if it were possible, and even 1,000 times better than myself. This is because they use the word ambition. This is because the ambition or desire of the conscience is to experience the maximum amount of love. It wishes to possess the absolute being. The same was true for our ancestors, and the same will be true for our descendants. Even God would respond in the same way. Now this is the second point, to emphasize the conscience, but now a more elucidation of the concept of subject-object partners in love. Is it possible? No, excuse me. Now, again, one more thing about conscience. Now, if we compare the human conscience with God's conscience, which would be larger? If God's conscience were larger than a human being's, what would God do with it? If God's conscience were larger than a human being's, what would God do with it? The conclusion is that what God wants to possess is the same as that desired by the immense ambition of each person, human being, and that is true love. True love. We know that God is absolute, yet do you think God is happy? Might God be lonely? Ladies and gentlemen, even if a person becomes president of the nation, or if he or she lives without a beloved, a spouse, children, that person cannot be happy. If we do not have an object partner, a beloved, we cannot be happy. Does God need someone that same way? How do you feel about this? Even if God is God, God feels lonely. The human being feels unhappiness, feels empty when he or she lacks money or knowledge or authority. However, God does not need money, knowledge, or power. This is because God is the creator. The question of all things. The question is, what does God need? We call God the king of love or the owner of love. If God is the king of love, this means that God needs a queen. This is an absolute principle. Then who can be the absolute God's object, partner of love? A true human being. True Mother says, my husband and I serve God, the subject, partner of love, and his object partners of love, who completely satisfy the desire, the ambition of God's conscience. It's quite a statement. Thus, just as human beings want their object partner of love to be infinitely more valuable than themselves, God also wants the human being, his beloved partner of love, to have infinite value. A true human being is a person of infinite value. Yet we did not know that Adam and Eve were meant to be that kind of man and woman. If we were given such high aspiration in our conscience, it is because God is the subject partner, and God wanted human beings to be in the position of his beloved object partner. God did not want human beings simply to be, this is what I am fascinated with. God did not want human beings simply to be a part of God. He wanted them to have a completely different personality. God did not want human beings simply to be a part of God, but wanted human beings to have a completely different personality. God allows us as human beings to have the action of conscience at such an elevated level simply because God hoped that human beings would be 1,000 or 10,000 times more valuable than even God. Can I ask anybody, what's your reaction to that in a short statement? That God wants us to be more valuable than even himself. What does that mean to anybody? Like to say something? What does that mean? What does that mean to you?
I think most healthy parents want their children to be better than they are. When kids grow up, they're nice when they're little and gurgling, but at a certain point, if they never grew up, if they never got older, they wouldn't be very stimulating. At a certain point, you hope to have an actual conversation.
Yeah.
So
everybody can hear her? Yeah. Okay, like any parent, the parent wants the children to be even better than themselves, more stimulating, more incredibly creative and interesting, endlessly interesting, right?
Serena can do things that I was never able to do. I am thoroughly impressed and I'm ecstatic for her. I'm ecstatic with myself. I'm ecstatic, together we have this excitement,
Yes.
I imagine that God wants that as well.
But it's God we're talking about. God the Almighty, God omnipresent, omniscient, knows everything.
It's a high standard.
It's a high standard. Anybody else like to comment on that? Jean, can you say loud?
I think God wants us to be creators. God gave us a whole world in which we could be creators of an entire life. So I think when I hear that God wants us to be better than himself,
Yes.
That God wants us to realize that we are the creators of our life, and we have been given all of the opportunities in a whole world. The natural world provides everything that we need to live. And so, sort of, God created us out of the dust of mud. We're supposed to create our lives by our consciousness and our conscience. And again, it comes back to the free will, power to choose, because without the power to choose your life, you don't have any free will.
Right.
So then that institutes your conscience. You can choose between what's good or what's not good. So I think God wants us to be creators.
Great. Creators, co-creators, partners in creation, together with God. Mr. Johnson.
God is the power that makes us.
You got to give you a mic, I think. Can't do it.
God is the power that inspires us, makes us speak. And just a note on your conscience and your consciousness.
I can't hear.
I think the words come from the same.
Sorry.
I would have to check on this, but I think consciousness and conscience come from the same root. So,
Good.
but I think it's a beautiful philosophy that you have described, and that I believe God is the power that gives us speech, and particularly inspired speech.
And poetry.
And thought.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. I agree with you also that conscience and consciousness, same root, which is a very important point, I think. So, thank you everyone. There's an emphasis, and some people maybe misunderstand it, even not just people who are interested in Asian religion or meditation, but even Christians, the Judeo-Christian tradition, Judaism also, mystics among Judaism as well as Christians. Sometimes too much misunderstanding about oneness with God, and or obedience to God. Many times we have to kind of challenge ourselves to go over our teaching, our beliefs, or that we were raised with, so that we, even if your ideas are so-called new ideas, even some of them we might have to leave behind, if we really start to see that God wants me to develop my individual conscience and consciousness and my individual creativity, so that sometimes we might even think that we're challenging or doing something that maybe God, I have to be careful with, that maybe God would not support. Later, many people who push themselves to understand this inkling they may have may discover that the value of God's eyes of our individual creativity. So, so who will know first? She asked. I'm sorry, one more thing. The person who lives in unity with a true conscience and true love will automatically enter the kingdom of heaven. No matter how much faith a person may have in Jesus, he or she is not linked to the love of God, or she or he is not linked to the love of God. If that person's mind and body are struggling, that person cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. The person who inherited Satan's lineage cannot enter the kingdom. Religions with the mission of opening the way are struggling. Their mission is to open the way towards God, but they themselves are struggling among themselves. This will lead to a sad state of affairs. God cannot be found where there is conflict. Religion is a movement to subjugate the body and liberate the conscience. Religion itself is not the key that unlocks the door to salvation. We have to know that the love, life, and true lineage of God are the key that opens the door to salvation. That is what we need to inherit. Faith in religion alone will not save us. In reality, religion exists as a foundation to discipline the body. When our conscience is liberated, its ambition can ascend to God. Does this idea make you want to try and find out more? Who will know first what someone is doing, the conscience or God? The conscience will know first. A human being is a person distinct from God, because he or she has to occupy the beloved object partner position to God in a meaningful way. In the same sense, wife and husband are different. The characteristics of each are clearly different. If we were to conclude that God knows everything prior to its happening, we would be saying that we are indistinct from God, as if we were a single body. Okay. It's mysterious, some aspect. In my opinion, to me it's mysterious. I asked Kevin Congery 2 weeks ago. He was exhibiting his painting, one of his paintings here, and he was talking I thought very profoundly about the relationship between nature, God's creation, and human civilization. How it interacts and how at times it doesn't, or seemingly doesn't, or sometimes conflict between the development of human civilization and nature, right? Pollution or the destruction of God's creation, or the extinction of certain animals. So when I asked him this question, I asked him, because he had this beautiful painting of a mythological story that comes from Greece, that was about this struggle between human civilization and nature. But I asked him, what is the purpose of, I asked him, are human beings, do we have a distinct personality separate from God? And if we do, why? Why? And we're talking about that already. I mean, Gene explained, we are created by God with a creative capacity, extraordinary capacity. And I would like to say, and we all kind of agreed on this point, the value, but I would like to really emphasize that there is a new emphasis, even more profound emphasis, in my opinion, coming in this world, of the eternal value of human beings. Since the fall occurred, we in reality, like I wrote this poem, I sang this song one time, we have never, we all are religious in some way, or have some religious education, but in my opinion, we don't know God. We haven't known God, or the real God, or even begun. Even God's face we don't know. And it's not because it's not God's desire. It sounds, how dare you say that? I know God, I have experience with God. Yeah, I understand, me too. But God's original creation, original purpose for creating us, we don't know enough. We don't experience it enough. Who we are to God. Our value to God. People today, will kill other people for the sake of keeping the trees in Oregon. Don't kill the trees. And there's even violence committed sometimes among people to protect what God created in nature. But human beings are God's most profound, important creation. And we are meant, as I think Gene suggested, to take care of and to create with what God gave us through nature. But the human mind, I mean, there's some thing people say, you know, people travel 200 miles, 2,000 miles to go see the mountains here or there. And we go and we inspect the rivers and the oceans, and we're studying all the things. But actually the human mind is even more vast. Do we really know that daily? Is that an experience that we have? The human mind, the creativity, and the capacity. This is because this also comes from God. So, and we're meant to be, as Insuk suggested, giving God the parent, joy as his children, inspiration, stimulation, forever. Now there's one other thing, I mean, a very interesting thing. True Mother says, she said, when, I don't know if you remember, True Father, he never said, you know, when somebody becomes 90 years old, he always said 100 years old. He said the human being's capacity to live is 100 years. He always said that, even 120. And I was kind of laugh, 100, okay, yeah, ideally we'll live 100 years. But anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, when parents reach the age of 100 years, I wrote down 90, and their children reach the age of 80, I wrote down 70. The relationship, this is the point, the relationship of parents and children also becomes a relationship of companions, of friends. That's really rich. So I want to ask this question. Isn't it true that we are looking for God? We are looking for God, right? Every day trying to find out God, experience God's love, God's will, understand this universe, asking God. We are looking for God. But God is looking at us all the time. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at God. But God is looking at me all the time. What does that mean? Is that true? What does that statement mean to? Maybe somebody can comment on that. What does it mean that God is looking at me? Alex.
God wants relationship. He's lonely. He wants relationship. He wants companionship. And so, in order to generate that, then there has to be a give and take of action.
Relationship.
Right.
Thank you. Anyone else? Gene. Last week, Reverend Kim started off his talk with, we all must be like philosophers. And I was thinking about that, and Gene is a philosopher. All right, go ahead.
We're all connected to God through, there's a field, the Akasha, the Prana, and it's not so much like God's like peering down on us, like on our lives, but our consciousness is connected to the greater consciousness. Our consciousness is connected to each other, the collective consciousness. But we can't separate our consciousness, I don't think, from God. Our conscience we can, but I don't think our consciousness is part of God. And so, God's not peering down on us. It's just that anything we do or any high emotions or experiences we're going through, it gets registered in the field. gets registered in the.
Gets what?
In the akasha, in the field, in the crowd.
Of energy.
And so we connected through that. If we could raise our awareness, we could, this is how psychics kind of raise their awareness and they can connect with the field a little bit, you know, but I think God knows everything that's going on because it's all happening in the consciousness field, and we can't separate from that as long as we're conscious, you know. Maybe we don't even know, even if we're unconscious, we're still part of the God.
Well, I would, thank you. I would like to suggest, maybe I don't understand exactly what you're saying, but like Insa said, we are the parents of our own children, and yet we don't know always what's going on with our children. And if we did, we couldn't be stimulated by them, and we couldn't also seek to help them until they've communicated with us. So we need to stimulate them to communicate with us and express themselves to us. Again, I'll put it this way. You are looking for God, but God is looking at you. You are looking for God, but God is looking at you. This means we're very important. We're very, very important. This means, you know, because we have something inside of us, no matter how bad we may be, we have the conscience and consciousness inside of us that was born when we were born and it comes from God. So God is always looking at us all the time. The mirror. You know, I'm always struggling to know my value, to feel value. I'm always struggling to find happiness and to overcome conflict within myself, conflict with other people. If I have struggled with other people, you know, feel angry or something, which frequently can happen in life and the job I have, then I struggle with them, but I struggle more with myself that I couldn't love them or communicate my love for them or my respect, or even that I could feel respect for them that made me so angry. So I'm disappointed in myself, right? Kind of like to end the contradiction between my conscience and what I do, right? But to me, it's very comforting to think that I am looking for God, but God is looking at me, always ready to help. Yes, Louis.
I want to hit what Alice just said. You know, God, I think, is closer to us than we think.
Yes.
Jesus said we are the temples.
Right.
We're the temples. That means God lives inside of us. It's not that He's outside looking in. He is within us.
Yeah.
And God is our creator, so we were made in a certain way. Okay? We were made to be an object of love. When I say an object of love, I don't mean like, you know, you're my slave, you do what I want, if you don't, I'm going to strike you dead.
Yeah.
The Old Testament, you know, Genesis, you know, or, you know, 28, if you don't do this, you're going to die, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But in a sense, that's also true, too. You know, but the bottom line is Jesus talked about this relationship that exists between Him and His Father.
Yes.
There's also that same relationship that we're supposed to have with God.
We're supposed to have, yes.
Same relationship. And we were created by God. We're co-creators
Right.
with God. So, yeah. But
Okay.
it's not from outside looking in. I think God's closer. He's inside of it. Or should be.
Well,
Should be.
I agree with that. I
We should be
understand.
consciously aware of that, but we're not, unfortunately.
No, we're not conscious of it enough.
Yeah.
Daily. Thank you. The idea, though, that two parents replace the word for conscience in a certain way sometimes with the word love, and then says our conscience loves us, that our conscience loves us. You said that God is within us. Our conscience is not outside of us, like you said. God is not outside of us. God is inside, right? So it's just this little bit different way of looking at it. The conscience inside is also always looking at us, right? Our conscience is always looking at us. Or we can say God is always looking at us too. And even the ideal love is always looking. So I feel from this kind of idea, me personally, I feel even closer to God. That I don't need to look outside. And also that God is, as it's teaching in this teaching, God or through the conscience is working to develop me. We can be confident that we have this inside of us, working to grow our hearts, our capacity to love. It's inside of you. Trust that. The capacity to love, like God loves, is inside of you. Okay, thank you. Okay, short prayer. Thank you very much for true Mother and Father's words today, and hopefully clear enough elucidation of those words, and from not only myself, but from our family members here. Thank you very much for this beautiful day in March, and we're praying for the meeting that's being held in New York with Reverend Shota and Chris Bush, and our other members are attending from around the country. We pray that they can come back with in safety and come back with new inspiration and ideas for all of us to participate. Thank you very much. I pray that the family of Kaady, Central West family, I should.